31 is where we're going to be looking at this morning. If you have a Bible and want to go ahead and turn over there. Job chapter 31. We started a series last week in the book of Job, looking at this man that at one time in his life had everything going for him. Everything was just out of this world, unbelievable going for him. And then he lost it all. And then in the end of the story of Job's life, God gave it all to him back. But as we saw, whether he was in a great time of success or when he was in a downtime and a valley in his life, he always maintained his faith in God, and he always maintained his integrity. And tucked away in the book of Job, in Job chapter 31, he tells us kind of what the keys to that was. I'm going to describe them as walls or barriers that he put up around his heart. And we looked at last week one of the 4 barriers that he put up around his life to guard his faith and integrity. And he started with the barrier, he started with the wall of sexual purity. He said that no matter what was going on in his life, whether it was the high lowest of lows, he was going to maintain some sexual purity in his life, be faithful to his wife. And this morning we're going to look at a second wall, a second barrier that he put up around his heart to protect it, and that's the barrier of truth and honesty. If you have your Bibles open to Job 31, we're going to start looking at verse 5 and following. Job says, he says, if I have walked in falsehood, or my foot has hurried after deceit, let God weigh me in honest scales, and he will know that I am blameless. If my steps have turned from the path, if my heart has been led by my eyes, or if my hands have been defiled, then may others eat what I have sown, and may my crops be uprooted. I have met a lot of liars over the years. Have y'all met them? I've met a lot of liars over the years, but one thing stands out to me about the liars I've met. I've never met anybody that confessed to being a liar, like a habitual liar. And I've never met anybody who bragged about being a liar. And this is a little bit odd to me. Every once in a while, you'll find somebody that, like, when they're caught in a lie, they'll, and they're like just a liar all the time. They'll come clean and they'll confess, yeah, you kind of caught me in that. But nobody just confesses that openly and brags about it. And it shocks me because I've heard folks confess and brag about and boast about nearly every other sin under the sun. I've heard men and women alike boast about their sexual conquests and the adulteries that they've had. I've talked to 2 murderers over the years, both of whom told me what they did, and one of them was very proud of what they did. He was boasting about it. I've talked to thieves who admitted to stealing, and I've talked with foul-mouthed folks that were very anxious to demonstrate their vulgarity. But out of all the liars I've known, I've never met anybody that just came up to me and said, hey, I'm a liar, and was just really proud about that thing and really boasted about that thing. Now, sometimes you'll meet somebody, again, that they get caught in the lie and they'll fess up to it, but even then they tend to spend more time trying to justify the lie they told or the reason for telling it than anything else. So with that in mind, that's how I'll approach the topic this morning. And I was through it just in life, in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I believe, just from observation, there are 3 reasons that we're tempted to lie. And there's 3 reasons that people go about telling lies in life. The first one is this. Sometimes we're tempted to lie to keep from hurting other people's feelings. You ever done that? You ever told just a little white lie to keep from hurting somebody's feelings? Job addresses that in the book of Job earlier. In Job chapter 6, verse 25, he says, how painful are honest words. And that's right. The truth does hurt sometimes. And when we're talking to people that we love, when we're talking to people that we care about, we don't want to hurt them. We don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to make them feel bad. So it's easier, we kind of justify that in our minds and say, well, it would be better to tell them a little white lie than to go out and to just hurt their feelings. But Job mentions in verse 5 of our text that it really doesn't matter if we're walking in falsehood or if we're hurrying after deceit, there's always going to be consequences to pay. So he says, it doesn't matter whether we're just kind of tiptoeing around the truth and like that to not hurt anybody's feelings, or whether we're just rushing right in and telling a lie that Who cares who we're going to hurt? There's always going to be some consequences to pay. I told this on my dad on Wednesday night, but there's more to the story since then, so I'm going to tell it again. Back when my dad was preaching in Virginia at my home church, this was the era when ladies would come in on Sunday morning, and they would walk up to the preacher either before services or after, and they would say, "Preacher, what do you think of my new outfit?" Or, "What do you think of my new hairdo?" And he said he kind of put them in a bind because sometimes their outfits were ugly. And sometimes their hairdos need to be redone. And so he didn't really know what to say. He didn't want to be mean. He didn't want to be rude. He certainly didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but he didn't want to lie either. So he came up with this phrase that he would use whenever the ladies would come in and ask him about their superficial appearance stuff. He would say this: "You like that, don't you?" Think about that. You like that, don't you? Now that's nice, isn't it? And it's not offensive. It just kind of puts it back on him. And they would say, "Yeah, I do like that." And they'd go right on. And they in their minds, they thought, "Oh, he really likes that outfit that I got on. He really likes that hairdo I got." And he just went on. Now, here's the rest of it. I'm going to get to hear about at lunch today when I see him. My dad preaches out at Oak Grove on Sunday mornings, but they don't have Wednesday night Bible study. So he was here the other night. But also Miss Susan Warren goes to Oak Grove, and she was here the other night for Bible study. After Bible study was over on Wednesday, she pulled me off to the side and said, "Chris, I really appreciate that Bible study." I said, "That's good, Miss Susan." She said, No. You don't get how much I appreciate that. I can't wait to get to church on Sunday morning and ask your daddy how much he likes my new outfit." So he's going to get set up for that, and I'm looking forward to it. But Paul instructs us to find a way to do this. Here's what he tells us. He says, "Speak the truth in love." Speak the truth in love. Now, this can be a hard balance to have. It's easy to speak the truth with no love, and it's easy to love people and tell them a lie because of it. But the Bible says we got to keep this balance of speaking the truth in love. The Bible tells us to do it. We see that Jesus did it, his entire ministry, and now Paul is instructing us as Christians. We've got to learn how to do that. And man, this can be a difficult thing, but it's an important skill to learn. It's an important skill to learn as Christians. Even in the secular world, they understand the reasoning or the importance behind this skill. In a lot of seminars and a lot of these seminars that bosses go to or people in authority in corporations go to, they teach them to do it in this way. Anytime you've got, whether it's an employee or somebody that you're leading in your organization and you need to criticize them about something, they need to do something better, it's taught to do that using a compliment sandwich. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I don't know if you've ever used that, but I guarantee somebody has used this on you. And what that is you go up to the person and you tell them something that they've done really good. I tell you what, you're really good at this. And then right after that, mention the critique you've got, something that they need to do a little bit better. And then before you walk off, say, "I tell you what, you really do this certain thing really good." Now, the secular world calls that a compliment sandwich. That's not what the Bible calls it. The Bible calls it simply speaking the truth in learn. And that is a skill that as Christians, we need to know. We need to learn this. If you think about it, some of the people that we all respect the most in life are the ones who are honest with us. They're the ones who are honest with us. When they see us doing something we're not supposed to, they'll call us out. When they see us doing something and we could do it a little bit better, they'll let us know. And they've got a way of letting us know that we're not offended, we're not anything like that. We appreciate their honesty. These people that we go to and we ask for advice and we ask for guidance, we ask for their wisdom, and when they give it to us, we're not offended by it. We just appreciate that. Well, that's what we want to get in life. And if that's what we want to get, then that's what we need to give. That's the kind of people that God's calling us to be. Just like Job, instead of falling into this temptation of, well, I'm going to tell a little lie because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, let's just learn to speak the truth and do so in a loving manner. The second reason that we find ourselves wanting to lie sometimes is that there's things in life that we want to get out of. You ever told a lie to get out of something? Like a speeding ticket? Or trouble at school, or trouble at home, or trouble at work, or maybe there was an event that came up and somebody thought it was going to be the greatest thing in the world and they wanted you to go to that party or that wedding or whatever, and you came up with something that you had that was just pressing that day, and you told that little white lie to kind of get out of that thing and not have to get involved in all that. When I was a kid, my dad got me and him season tickets to watch the James Madison Dukes play basketball. Small school, they were less than $100 for the whole season worth of tickets. But man, we went to those basketball games and we thoroughly enjoyed doing that together as father and son. But the problem was some of their games fell on Wednesday nights, and we had church on Wednesday nights. So the game started at 7 and church started at 7. So what my dad did on those nights is he would teach, and as soon as he got done teaching, he would grab me and we would go over across town and we would go to the basketball games, and we would catch most of the time the second half of the game. Well, one particular game was coming up that season, and it was like the game of the year, the one that we were looking forward to the most. But man, it happened. It fell on a Wednesday night, and Dad got done teaching. If I had to guess, he might have talked a little quick that night when he was teaching, but he got done teaching. He grabbed me. We go across town to the Convocation Center where they played. Nobody else is going in at this time. Everybody that's going to this game is already there. And there was 2 sections you could park in. There was the free parking, which was out in the boondocks. It's where we always parked. And then there was the place that you had to pay for parking up near, closer to the building. You could just zip right in. Well, on the way to go out to the boondocks to park, Dad looks over and he sees that there's some openings in the permitted parking area that we didn't have a permit for. So he zips in there, and lo and behold, there was a parking attendant right there. Dad rolls down his window, and the guy, he didn't even come over to the car. He just said, "You got a permit with you?" Dad said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Go on in and enjoy the game." So we went on in, and I was thinking, man, this is cool. We're going to get in there. We're going to get to watch this game even quicker. We don't have to walk a mile and a half to the arena. This is going to be great. So he pulls in, and he pulls in the parking lot. I hop out the car. I go around the back of the car, and I'm waiting for Dad. I'm like, he needs to hurry up, get that seatbelt off, open the door. It's time to go watch the game. And he just sits there. And I'm seeing him sitting in the car, and this is like, there ain't no cell phones back then. He wasn't playing on his phone. He was just sitting there. I was like, come on, Dad, what in the world? Well, after what seemed like an eternity, he opened the door and said, "Hey, buddy, get back in the car. There's something we need to do." Like, what in the world could we do that would be more important than going inside and watching the James Madison Dukes play some team that I don't even remember? And he said, "Get back in the car. We got something we need to do." So begrudgingly, I went and I got back in the car. And before he even started the car, he said, "I lied to that man. I said, you know we ain't got any tickets or any passes to park here." I said, "Yes, sir, I know." He backed the car out. He went out. He apologized to that man for lying. And we went and we parked way out in the boondocks. And I tell you what, my dad is just like yours was probably, or your mother, or your grandparents, or your teachers. And they taught us these lessons in life. They taught us these things. A man is only as good as his word. Always be honest. Tell the truth no matter what. He told me those things all the time. I don't really remember any specific instances of him telling me that, but I do remember that 5 minutes of basketball that we missed that day and how he demonstrated it. I'll never forget that he lived it out. He didn't for a minute, and then he corrected it. And that's what Job's teaching us to do in our text for this morning. When we get tempted to go through these issues in life where, man, if we just tell a lie, we could get out of this. Somebody's going to catch on to that. It might be your kid. It might be your coworker. It might be somebody that knows you're a Christian and is watching the way you live to see if this whole thing with your faith is worth it. Let me tell you something. I promise you that whatever lie you tell to get out of whatever it is not going to be worth your faith, and it is not going to be worth your integrity. It's never going to be worth it. The third thing that we're tempted to lie about sometimes isn't just to get out of something, but sometimes we lie to see what we can get out of it. In verse 6, Job mentions honest scales. It's not really a thing that we worry about a lot in our culture, but in Job's culture, he was attacking unruly or or unjust business practices is what he's addressing here when he mentions these honest scales. What would happen a lot of times is in business, people would tend to rip each other off by fudging the scales one way or another. Let's say a farmer came and he had 100 pounds of wheat that he wanted to sell, and the ones that were buying the wheat on their scales at the marketplace, they had it marked down to where it looked like when you weighed it up, that was only 80 pounds worth. So he would only pay the farmer for 80 pounds worth of wheat instead of the full 100. And then they would turn around and use different scales when they were selling it to the poor people that were coming to get wheat. And the poor people might come in and they might be wanting to buy 10 pounds worth of wheat, and they might put what they thought was 10 pounds worth of wheat up there, and it actually was, but it was showing that it was 12 pounds. So they were getting them on both ends with these dishonest scales. And what Job is saying here is, look, we need to have honest scales in our lives. In verses 7 and 8, he really hones in on that. Look at that passage again. He says, if my steps have turned from the path, if my heart has been led by my eyes, or if my hands have been defiled, then may others eat what I have sown, and may my crops, may they be uprooted. Have you ever had a situation where your heart was led by your eyes, where your heart was deceived because of something your eyes saw and they just wanted, and it caused you to compromise your values and compromise the truth and do something or say something misleading to get something that you wanted out of it? Or he puts it in this way: have you ever had your hand defiled because it wasn't truthful and you took something that wasn't rightfully yours? I'm not necessarily talking about walking into Walmart and stealing something off the shelf. Maybe it's fudging a number on a tax document or something like that, but you took something under false pretenses. The story's told of a rancher who went to a veterinarian friend of his and asked for some free advice. He said, I got this horse, and he's just not working out for me. Said he'll go a few days, and he does good. He walks normally, he runs normally, he works normally, and then the next few days, he'll limp around like he can hardly move. So what do you think I should do about that? What's the solution to it? And the veterinarian said the solution's simple. Next time he walks good, sell him. That's what you need to do. The next time he walks good, you need to sell him and not mention anything about the fact that he's got a defect about it. I got to think about this. How many times in life are we tempted to do something like that? Are we tempted just to not reveal the full truth? For years and years, Fran and I bought all of the vehicles that we drove off of either. It started with Craigslist, and then it kind of evolved into now it's Facebook Marketplace more so. And when you're buying from those types of places, it's all used vehicles, you've got to trust people. And you've got to trust that they're going to tell you what's wrong with the vehicle. And we were very blessed over the years in buying vehicles that I can't remember one where somebody told us a big lie or hid a major problem from a vehicle we bought. And when we sold one, we tried to do the same thing. I would always make a list of all the stuff, sometimes it was a right long list, of all the stuff that was wrong with a vehicle before we sold it. One time in particular, though, I had some regrets about this that we joked about in our family. We had a minivan that Fran had drove when the girls were little. And she liked the thing because it had a button on the side of the door, and them doors just slid open. And she could slide a carrier in there, and she could do that kind of stuff. And then, that was like that was a hot commodity when you had two little kids at the same time, 15 months apart. Was them buttons with them sliding doors. Well, after a while, that van started acting up. And I don't know anything about this stuff, but took it to a mechanic, and it wasn't acting up all the time. Just every once in a while, he ran some tests and said, your transmission's about to go out, and you're going to have to put a new transmission in it. And I trusted the mechanic. I knew him lying to me. I was like, all right. Well, I didn't want to mess with that. I just wanted to get rid of the thing. We got her something else to drive, and we got on whether it was Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace at the time, and we sold it. But in the advertisement, I put in there that, look, it's got some transmission issues. And I told them, when we met the people, we got a phone call. The people wanted us to meet us with a lady. She wanted to meet us up at the Food Line parking lot. So Fran followed me up there in case we actually sold the van, and I told her, I didn't know the lady at the time, but I told her, I said, look, it's got transmission issues. It doesn't show up all the time, but the mechanic said at some point it's going to need a transmission to be put in this thing. Well, she agreed to buying it. I mean, we had dropped the price down it was pretty cheap because of the transmission problem. But she asked us to do her a favor. She said, when I'll buy the vehicle, but would you mind taking it to my house? I said, that's no problem where you live. So we're just outside of Tarboro. I said, no problem whatsoever. So Fran followed me to the house, and when we got there, a lot of y'all are going to know this house. I'm going to describe it. I don't know what road it is, but it's on the kind of the back way into Tarboro. If you're going to the nursing home area, that side of it, on the right-hand side, there's a psychic. Y'all know what I'm talking about? It's like Madam Rose. All right, I knew it was Madam somebody. I knew somebody'd know what I was talking about. Well, lo and behold, that's the yard we pull into. And I get to talking to this lady, and she's Madam Rose, you know? And so Fran had sat in our car the whole time, and I did the documents and signed the stuff and went and got back in. When I got in, I slammed the car, and I acted mad. I said, man. Fran said, what's wrong with you? I said, we should have sold that thing for $1,500 more. I said, why? I said, because we didn't have to tell her about that transmission. I said, what are you talking about? I said, we shouldn't have told her about that transmission. We should have passed it off like everything was all right. She said, we can't do that. I said, yeah, we can. She's a psychic. She ought to know exactly when that thing is going to go out. And we laughed about that thing in our lives. But, you know, you can't do that stuff. You can't do that stuff because eventually that stuff's going to come back to you. And what Job is teaching us here in these verses is we've got to be honest in our business dealings. In the end, he mentions what the consequences would be if he wasn't honest, if he didn't use honest scales, if his eyes led him astray, if his hands led him astray. He says, then may others eat what I have sown, and may my crops be uprooted. If we don't do things the right way, there's going to be consequences to pay. So those are the kind of the reasons most of the time that we tell a lie. Maybe it's out of some convenience that we don't want to hurt somebody. Maybe out of something. Maybe it's to get something out of it. But those are the reasons. I've also heard this in my life as well, and I experienced this one firsthand. If you're going to lie, you better have a really good memory, because you got to remember that lie. And you got to always remember it, because other people are going to. Several years ago, I drove a truck for a long time, a Toyota truck. When I bought it, it had a hole in the windshield. It looked like somebody shot it with a .22 or something. Now, they didn't go all the way through the glass, but it looked like there was just a bullet hole right there in the windshield. Well, several years ago, I took a couple of teenage boys duck hunting, and one of them I'd taken several times. The other one, I didn't even know him until that morning. The place we were hunting that morning, we pulled up, and we didn't go in too far. I parked right there beside the swamp. We walked down in, and the boy that he hadn't been before, I left him pretty close so he wouldn't have to walk through the swamp far. I went in the middle, and the other boy, he was young, he went on out, and we were just past shooting some wood ducks as we went by. And on the way out, the boy that had hunted with me a lot, I nudged him, and I said, watch this. So we get up to the boy that I'd never met before, his first time duck hunting and everything, and I said, man, you didn't shoot out towards that field where my truck was parked one time, did you? He said, oh, no, sir. I said, okay. I said, well, it sounded like maybe you did one time. I thought maybe I saw your gun pointed out that way. You sure you didn't shoot my truck? It sounded like it. He said, oh, no, sir, I didn't shoot your truck. I said, okay. So we went on out to the truck. Another boy, he knew what was going on at this time. He was smiling, and we got out there, and we're taking our waders off and everything. And I got around the front of the truck, and I pointed at the windshield and said, oh, my goodness gracious. I knew it sounded like you'd hit my truck. Look at that thing. And that boy come around there, and his eyes got big. And I mean, the color went all out of his face. And he didn't say a word. Like, he never said a word. We got in there, and of course, we're snickering about it. Me and the other boy, we were snickering about it because he knew about the spot in the windshield. I dropped him off and went on about the day. I never thought about that thing anymore. I never thought about it anymore. It was probably a year and a half, 2 years later. I saw that boy, and I recognized him. I saw him up in Robertsonville, and I went up and started talking to him. And the whole time we were talking, he was kind of just standing there like this. And I had no idea why. I was like, man, and I said, man, you've been back. We talked, and I could tell he remembered going and everything, but he wouldn't talk to him. Well, I saw his buddy not long after that. I said, hey, man, I saw so-and-so up in Robertsville the other day. I said, yeah, like, he didn't want to talk to me, though. And he said, well, you know why, don't you? And he started laughing. I said, no, why? He said, he thinks you shot your truck. I said, he thinks what? He said, yeah, he still thinks he shot your window. You remember how you told him about that hole in your window? And he told me that thing, I got so bad. It wasn't about a month or two later I saw him again. And I went and confessed what I had done. I said, hey, you remember that time we went duck hunting? He said, yeah, I remember that time we went duck hunting. So you remember how I told you about how you shot my wind out of my truck? Yeah, I remember that. I said, look, I was just joking. I bought the truck. It had that hole. I was messing with you the whole time. The look that he gave me. I don't know whether he was relieved that he hadn't shot my truck or he wished he would have shot me. But, man, that was so dumb. You know, if we lie, our memories ain't going to be good enough. If you're going to lie, your memory, I promise you, it ain't going to be good enough to remember what you said. But somebody else will. Somebody else will remember what you said. And you know what? When they remember what you said, the truth comes out, you're going to lose their trust. And I have no doubt in my mind. I've seen that young man several times since then, and we laugh about it now when we talk about it, but there's no doubt in my mind that I lost some of his trust because I was messing with him like that. Let me leave you with this litmus test for your honesty and for your integrity. Job gives this to us in verse 6. Job says, let God, the one who knows all of our actions, everything that comes out of our mouth, even the intentions in our hearts. He says, let God weigh me in honest scale, and he'll know that I'm blameless. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to ask God to weigh what you say on honest scale, and weigh what you do, and weigh your motives and see if they're honest? That's the litmus test that we're called to here by Job and in Scripture by the Lord. Lord, weigh me on honest scales. If we're not willing to do that, then we need to repent and we need to change. That's the only way that we can build that wall around our integrity and to protect our faith. We talked about it last week. We've got to have that wall of sexual purity, but we've also got to have that wall of honesty and have that wall of. Would y'all stand with me as we pray this morning? Father, I thank you that you've given us your word and you've shown us through the example of your son, Jesus. You've shown us through the example of Job in our text for this morning, the example of Paul and what they teaches us in the New Testament. Just that in all of our dealings, whether it's business dealings or interpersonal dealings, or Father, was just mentioned as found out even just joking with a guy, we just need to be honest. And Father, I just pray that you'll be with us and help us to have integrity in our talk, our integrity in our walk, just that we'll be truthful in our dealings, Father, that when people look at us, they'll say, hey, that man's as good as his work. And that they'll just be able to trust us. And Father, hopefully that plays out into the faith that we're able to pass on to the next generation as well. Lord, we love you. It's in Jesus' name.